Buongiorno, sono Vandana. Piacere di conoscerla. We are going to make the most iconic Italian bread today, which is very light and airy and has got an incredibly spongy texture to top with. Hey, welcome back, friends. This week, let's make this flat bread from Italy, the focaccia. This has got a lot of flavor of rosemary and fresh cherry tomatoes in addition to virgin olive oil. If you like this recipe, leave a comment in the box below and a thumbs up for sure. I am sure most of the ingredients are in your pantry right now, so let's get started. We require plain flour 2 cups, instant dry yeast 2 teaspoons, salt 1 teaspoon, sugar 2 tablespoons, Italian seasoning as required, rosemary as required, olive oil 3 tablespoons, and fresh cherry tomatoes. Feel free to use them as many as required. They blend well with olive oil and rosemary and give a good texture and flavor to our bread. If you ask me the difference between the tomatoes and cherry tomatoes, I would say while regular tomatoes are sweet and tangy in flavor, cherry tomatoes have a slightly tarty and sour taste. Focaccia is an incredible way to use up those funky berries. Let's move on to our kitchen for making this incredible bread. Have a cup of warm water and stir in the instant dry yeast, giving a quick mix in only one direction. Now, let's add the sugar. It's the food for the yeast. Any variation in the quantity of sugar will affect the quality of focaccia, so really we need to stick to the measurements. Keep mixing for a few seconds until everything is combined well. Now, let it rest at room temperature for about 15 minutes, fully covered. After 15 minutes mark, the liquid is foamy and cloudy. Stir it again with a spoon until everything is completely dissolved. It should be smooth and creamy before we start preparing the dough. If your yeast is not cloudy even after the 15 minutes mark, discard the mixture and start afresh. Next step is making the dough. Let's add salt first. If the concentration of the salt is way too high, it can indeed kill the yeast. So add only as per my recipe. You can add the Italian seasoning of your choice to the dough. Give a quick mix before moving further. I have added a mix of dried basil and thyme here. Remember, salt is what brings out the flavor in the bread and controls yeast growth so that the resulting crumble is very nice and even. Let me share a few more important tips here. The yeast used and temperature of water is very important here. If your yeast is expired, you will not get a good rise, and if you use hot water, the yeast will be killed instantaneously. So, when you make the yeast mixture, do keep a watch. It's time to mix in the yeast mixture now, and we will work through the mixture with a wooden spoon, and then we are free to use our hands. It precisely requires about 10 minutes to put together the dough. The initial consistency is definitely wet and sticky, which is not a reason of worry though. Stickiness is related to the hydration in our dough, so we need not add any more flour here. Instead, we can add 3 tablespoons of olive oil here and work on the dough for a few more seconds. When you can feel that the dough is elastic and soft to touch, keep it in a large bowl for rising, covered with a cling wrap in the refrigerator for about 8 hours. After the 8 hours mark, remove it from the refrigerator. You can see that the dough has doubled and there are small air pockets in the dough. Keep it at room temperature for about 2 hours. Then we will start working on our sticky dough. Initially, you may find it very difficult to put together the dough, but remember, no more flour. You may use oil if required. This is the consistency of the sticky dough. Now, let's grease our hands with oil and work on the dough again. Still, it is very sticky. Now let's grease a pan with oil and transfer our dough to it. Spread it evenly into the pan and don't worry if the dough is still sticky. This bread is meant to be that way. Now let's apply oil onto our palms and fingers so it's easy to make as many dimples as possible. The process of dimpling simply means to press down your fingers into the dough. But remember not to go too deep as it could rip holes into the dough, and do not pop the bubbles if you see any. Once the process of dimpling is over, let's start decorating our focaccia bread. I have got a few cherry tomatoes here. So I am just keeping it on my dough. Sprinkle some rosemary. If you could get hold of some fresh rosemary, then just go ahead. Let the decorated dough be at room temperature for about 15 minutes without a covering. You can see tiny bubbles appearing on the dough, and it's a good time to start our final process, baking. Bake at 190 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes in the middle rack of the oven. As I always say, oven temperatures may vary, so do keep a watch on your Italian flatbread after the first 25 minutes mark. When your bread is done, it will be golden brown on top and the underside too will be the same. So after 30 minutes mark, here comes our king of Italian bread, the fresh cherry tomato focaccia. Serve it warm. Hope you loved this recipe as much as I did. So what stops you from trying this recipe this weekend? I hope you will not forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel with the bell icon on. I will meet you coming week with a surprise recipe. Stay tuned for more from this end. Till then, bye-bye.